It didn't start with a fight. It started with a fork scraping a plate, and ended with my wife handing me a list of reasons our marriage was a mistake. Hey folks, thanks for stopping by again. I've got something fresh to share today, and I'll be honest, it's been weighing on me. Let's dive right in. It didn't start with some fiery outburst or dramatic shouting match. It began with the quiet, grating scrape of a fork across ceramic. One of those sounds that makes your skin crawl if you're paying attention. That's when my wife, Emily, dropped her fork with a clatter, her eyes locking onto mine like I was the punchline to some long, bitter joke she'd been telling herself for years. "I should have listened," she muttered, her voice sharp and cold, barely above a whisper but cutting all the same. "I should have listened to my friend Megan. She said Megan had given her 7 warnings. 7. And now here she was stuck in this, her words, sad excuse of a marriage, with me. Those words didn't just hurt, they gutted me. I was sitting there with my Tuesday night dinner thinking the meatloaf had turned out all right. For a moment, everything felt ordinary, then she turned the entire table upside down, metaphorically speaking. There was no lead-up, no signs of what was coming. Just this sudden raw verbal jab, like she'd been rehearsing every syllable for months. The way she emphasized the phrase sad excuse of a marriage, like it was poison in her mouth, it made my skin crawl. You'd think I had betrayed her in some unspeakable way, but as far as I could tell, my only real crime was being the guy she decided to say yes to 5 years ago. Then she started listing things off, tapping each finger like a judge reading out a sentence. Her eyes never wavered from mine. "I ignored every warning because I thought I knew better," she said. "I thought you were different. I thought this would work. Somehow." That last word, somehow, just lingered in the air between us, heavy and final. Like she'd just hammered the last nail into the coffin of everything we'd built. She didn't even see it as a relationship anymore. To her, this wasn't a marriage, it was some bizarre twist of fate she was ready to undo. I kept chewing, not because I was hungry anymore but because I needed something to keep my hands busy. There was a weight settling in my chest, and I could tell this wasn't going to be over quickly. She wasn't looking for a discussion, she had a monologue prepared. Emily began pacing back and forth like a restless animal trapped in too small a space. Every few steps, she'd stop dead in her tracks, jab a finger in my direction, and shake her head, like she was staring at the biggest letdown of her life. Maybe I thought to myself, staring down at my half-eaten dinner like it could somehow explain how we got here. "You want to know what they told me?" Emily asked, though it wasn't really a question. Her tone made it clear she wasn't looking for an answer. "They told me things that could have spared me all of this. This life, this mistake, this feeling of being stuck with someone who doesn't give me what I need." That word, stuck, it hit me like a slap. Not unhappy. Not confused. Stuck. Like I was some kind of warden and she was the poor soul locked behind the bars. And the worst part? She truly believed it. That I was holding her captive in some loveless, directionless life she never really wanted. The irony was like a splinter in my throat. I was the one breaking my back, working late nights and early mornings just to keep the lights on and groceries in the fridge. Meanwhile, she was pouring her heart out to her friends, painting me as the villain in some tragic love story. And she kept going. Picking up speed now like a train that had finally found its track. All of them saw what I couldn't. Every single one. They tried to warn me and I just smiled, nodded along and thought I knew better. Thought I had it figured out. She shook her head slowly as if even now she couldn't believe how naive she had been. "Well," she said with a hollow laugh, "they were right. About all of it." I finally looked up from my plate. My hands were still resting beside the meatloaf, my fork idle. "So, what exactly did they say?" I asked quietly. Her lips curled into a cold, deliberate smile. Not a smile of joy but the kind of smirk people wear when they're about to prove just how little you know. "Oh, now you care. Now you want to know what people really think about our marriage." I put my fork down. This wasn't a fight. This was something else entirely. A setup. She had the floor and I was just there to sit through it. Then she pulled out her phone. My stomach dropped. She actually had notes. A list. Talking points. This wasn't off the cuff. This had been drafted, revised, prepared. It felt less like a heart-to-heart and more like a courtroom, and I was already on trial. "Number 1, she started, holding up her index finger like she was giving a presentation. "Never marry your first serious boyfriend." She let that one hang in the air, watching me like a hawk, waiting to see if it landed. "That's what Megan told me the day after you proposed. She said I needed more life experience, more perspective. I should have dated more. Seen what else was out there." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stared at her, waiting for the next hit. Number 2, she said without missing a beat. Never marry a man who can't give you the life you want right now. Not someday. Not if things go well. Now. She mimicked her friend's words, like she'd memorized them. Waiting on potential is just asking to be let down. Another pause. Another sharp look my way, fishing for a reaction. All I did was gesture with my hand. Go on. If she was gonna torch everything we'd built, the least she could do was use the whole box of matches. And from the fire in her eyes, she didn't need much convincing to keep going. The rest of her list came pouring out like a monologue she'd been rehearsing in front of a mirror for months. Every word was precise, like she'd been dying to deliver these lines. Number 3, she said without missing a beat. Never give up your own apartment. She stared at me as if this was supposed to be some grand revelation. Always keep your independence. Always have a space to escape to when things go south. I almost laughed. Almost. This coming from the same woman who basically started living with me after our second date, and by month 3 was pushing for us to combine our bank accounts. She had thrown herself into our shared life with such intensity back then, you'd think she couldn't wait to build something together. Now it was like she was rewriting history in real time. Number 4, she continued, never take on traditional wife roles unless he's stepping up to be the traditional husband. She didn't even blink. Don't cook for him. Don't clean. Don't manage his home unless he's earning enough to make it worthwhile. That one hit me harder than I expected. All those snide remarks she'd made over the years about feeling like a maid? I used to think they came from moments of frustration, maybe a rough week, maybe she was overwhelmed. But now I realized they weren't off-the-cuff complaints. They were rehearsed, regurgitated lines from her personal board of advisors. Then came number 5, and her tone dipped into something colder. Never marry someone before you've had enough experiences. You need to travel by yourself. Date other people. Figure out who you really are and what you actually want before you just settle for what's easy. That word, settle, was like ice in my veins. So that's what I was to her. Not someone she loved. Not someone she chose. Just the easy route. The least complicated option at the time. Number 6, she said, glancing down at her phone again like she didn't want to miss a single word. Don't marry a man who expects you to contribute equally if you're not earning equally. The man should take care of the big stuff. Anything the woman gives is extra, not required. I couldn't help but shake my head a little. We had always divided things proportionally. I made more, so naturally I paid more. It wasn't perfect, but it was what we agreed on. I thought we'd found balance. But now she was framing her half, not even half, as some kind of favor I should have bowed down in gratitude for. Like I was lucky she chipped in at all. And then came number 7. Her voice rose as she said it, like she was climbing toward the grand finale. Always have a backup plan, she said. Always keep one foot out the door. Always stay connected to people who might offer you a better life. And there it was. The backup plan. The not-so-late nights that turned into early mornings. The whispered phone calls behind closed doors. The sudden change in wardrobe. The perfume I didn't recognize. She hadn't just been pulling away, she had been preparing. Preparing for my replacement. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was the stand-in. The in-between. And she hadn't been living in this marriage for a while now, she'd been auditioning for the next one. She finally lowered her phone and crossed her arms, the performance now complete. Well, she said, her voice tinged with finality, there it is. 7 warnings I brushed aside because I believed I was in love. Her eyes bored into me as she continued. And now here I am, stuck in a marriage with someone who can't give me what I need. Someone who doesn't know how to give me the life I deserve. Her words landed like stones, cold and sharp. You're so content with being average, she added, almost with disgust, that you don't even realize how much of my potential I've thrown away staying with you. I sat there in silence, letting it settle. 7 points. 7 ways I had fallen short. 7 reasons she believed this whole marriage had been one big, avoidable mistake. And as much as each sentence cut deeper than the last, there was something else that surfaced beneath all the pain, clarity. Like a fog finally lifting. So I asked the only question that made sense in that moment. What do you want to do about it? Her face changed instantly. That caught her off guard. Completely. Like I'd broken the script she'd rehearsed over and over in her head. She was geared up for a battle, for me to protest, to beg, to defend myself. She was expecting an apology, maybe even tears. What she wasn't ready for was composure. What do you mean? She asked, her voice faltering. I mean exactly what I said, I replied, keeping my voice calm. You've told me you believe this marriage was a mistake. That I'm not who you need. That you've wasted 5 years with me. So I'm asking, What do you want to do now? She opened her mouth like she had an answer waiting, then closed it again, and opened it once more only to say nothing. The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. This wasn't how she'd planned it. She had spent so much time and energy preparing the speech, lining up every painful point, but she hadn't thought past the explosion. She had no idea what to do after the damage was done. I don't know, she finally muttered. I hadn't really thought about that. I just needed you to understand how I feel. And that's when something clicked. The light bulb moment. This wasn't about fixing anything. This wasn't about salvaging our relationship or building something new. This was about making me feel it. About dragging me down to where she was emotionally so the pain didn't feel so one-sided. She didn't want a solution. She wanted me to carry the weight of her resentment. To feel as inadequate, as unfulfilled, as disappointed as she did. I stood up from the table, gathered my plate, and headed to the sink. That's interesting, I said, my back to her. You've spent all this time thinking about how broken our marriage is, but not a second thinking about how to actually fix it. I could hear her footsteps trailing behind me. She followed me into the kitchen, and for the first time all evening, her confidence was starting to waver. Of course I want to fix things, Emily said quickly, almost defensively. That's why I'm having this conversation with you. I turned around slowly, resting my hands on the edge of the sink, facing her fully now. No, I said calmly. What you're doing is being honest about what your friends think you should want. There's a difference. She crossed her arms tightly, eyes narrowing. Don't turn this into some attack on them, she snapped. They're just looking out for me. Looking out for you how? I asked, keeping my voice even. What awful things have they supposedly seen in me that you couldn't see yourself? She started pacing again, but this time it wasn't with that same confident rhythm. It looked more like she was scrambling, trying to remember what she'd rehearsed. Her steps were less sure, her voice less firm. Well, like the fact that you're just content, she said. With being ordinary. With not pushing yourself. You don't try to reach higher or do more, to give more. So, basically, your friends think I should be more ambitious. More driven. More successful. More wealthy. I said. It's not about money, she insisted quickly, but the edge in her voice betrayed the truth. It's about having goals. About showing some drive. All right, I nodded. Fair enough. So let me ask you this. What goals do you have, Emily? Other than marrying someone with a better paycheck, what are you aiming for? What do you want to build? What legacy are you working on that doesn't involve standing next to a more accomplished man? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. She didn't respond right away, just stood there, blinking at me like the foundation of her argument had suddenly turned to sand. Her whole argument had been about what I wasn't doing. What I lacked. What I failed to be. But not once had she stopped to consider what she was bringing into the marriage. What she was actually building with her own hands. That's not the point, she finally said, her voice a little quieter now. The point is that I followed my heart instead of my head. And now I'm paying the price. I nodded slowly. Okay. So you admitted you made a mistake. You married the wrong guy. You ignored the advice of the people you trust. So the real question is. I paused, letting the silence press in just enough to make her feel it. What do you want to do about it? She looked away for a moment, then back at me. I want you to understand, she said. I want you to acknowledge that things need to change. That you need to change. I want you to step up. Be the husband I need you to be. And there it was. She didn't want out. She didn't want a new life. She wanted me reshaped, repackaged, rebranded into someone else. Someone more ambitious. Someone wealthier. Someone who met her friend's checklist of who she should have married. She didn't want a divorce. She wanted a do-over, with the same man just upgraded. She wanted to take her friends' critiques and use them like a crowbar, pry me open, reshape me into something that fit their version of what her husband should be. So what if I can't be that guy? I asked, my voice steady. She looked at me, clearly confused. What do you mean? Can't? Anyone can improve themselves. Anyone can try harder. I gave her a small smile, not one of joy but the kind that comes when you finally see things clearly no matter how much it hurts. You're right, I said. People can change. But the real question is, do I want to change for you? Or for someone who already sees value in who I am right now? Her expression faltered. The color drained from her face just slightly. What are you saying? She asked, barely above a whisper. I'm saying your friends might have been right about at least one thing, I told her. Maybe you did make a mistake marrying me. And maybe, the most honest thing we can do now is fix that mistake. Her voice trembled as she asked, fix it how? By giving you exactly what you said you wanted, I said. Freedom. Freedom from this marriage you called pathetic. Freedom to go and find someone who checks every one of your friend's boxes. Freedom to chase that ideal life you think you were supposed to have. She took a step back like I just pushed her. That's not what I meant, she said quickly, panic starting to show. I don't want to end our marriage. I know, I said. You don't want to leave, you just want me to become someone else. Someone better. Someone more acceptable, based on standards handed to you by people who've never spent a single night in this house, who've never seen us at our best or worst. The kitchen went quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't hers. It belonged to me. And it was final. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Emily was still asleep, which suited me just fine. I needed a head start on the day. There were things I needed to set in motion. It's strange how different the world feels after a full night of sleep and the quiet realization that your marriage, your whole shared life, is done. It wasn't rage or grief I felt. Just stillness, focus. I made a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop and got to work. If she wanted to live the version of her life that her friends believed she missed out on, then I figured the least I could do was help her experience the full picture. First on the list? I logged into our joint accounts and started separating our finances. Not out of spite. Not to punish her. But because that independence she'd been longing for, that I could give her. It was her dream after all. I was just making room for her to live it. I rerouted my direct deposits into a new personal account and left enough in the joint one to cover her share of the bills for the next month. No more, no less. After that, I picked up the phone and called the credit card companies. Any card where she had been listed as an authorized user? Cancelled. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because she said she wanted independence. And independence meant learning how to manage her own credit, her own spending habits, her own future. Finally, I opened up our budgeting software and created a clear breakdown of every monthly expense. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, the works. I calculated it all down to the cent and split it proportionally based on our incomes. She made roughly 30% of what we brought in combined, so her share of the household expenses would now reflect that. No more 50-50s. Her friends thought equal contribution was unfair? Fine. This was the alternative. This was fair. By the time she drifted into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, everything was laid out on the table in a crisp manila folder labeled in black marker. Independence Plan. She poured herself a cup of coffee, glanced at the folder, then looked up at me. What's all this? I slid it across the table toward her. Your freedom, I said. I spent the morning thinking about everything you said last night. And you were right. She blinked. I was. Absolutely, I said nodding. You should get the chance to live the life your friends think you missed out on. The one where you kept your independence. Managed your own money. Took control of your path. She opened the folder slowly, cautiously, as if it might bite. What do you mean exactly? I'm giving you what they told you to want, I said. Separate finances. Personal accountability. Proportional bill sharing. No more joint accounts. No more feeling stuck. No more being financially tethered to a man you think is dragging you down. She flipped through the documents, account statements, a budget summary, instructions for opening her own credit card, everything she'd need to start managing her financial life solo. This says you closed our joint credit cards, she said, her voice tightening. Correction, I replied gently. I removed you as an authorized user. The accounts are still open, just no longer connected to you. You can apply for your own cards now. Build your credit. Make your own decisions. She kept flipping through and her frown deepened. And these monthly expenses? She asked, holding up the breakdown sheet. She stared at the sheet for a few seconds before speaking, her voice tight with disbelief. This says I owe over $1,200 a month. Just for my portion of the house? That's right, I said calmly. It's based on the proportional income model, the one you said was fair. You bring in about 30% of our combined earnings, so you're responsible for 30% of our shared expenses. I gave her a half smile. Math doesn't lie. It's kind of beautiful that way. She kept looking at the paper, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves if she stared long enough. I can't afford this, she muttered. My paycheck barely stretches as it is. I don't have room for $1,200 in housing costs, plus food, gas, insurance, everything else. I nodded, not unkindly. Yeah, I know. That's probably why your friends encouraged you to marry someone who could cover everything. Someone who'd shoulder the financial load for you. I leaned back in my chair. But that's not what you chose. You didn't follow their advice. So now, you get to live out the alternate version. She shook her head, but the energy was draining out of her. This is ridiculous. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. The conviction had bled out of it. You're just being petty, she said. You're doing this to get back at me. I'm being practical, I replied. You told me last night that you felt trapped in a marriage where you were expected to carry equal weight. So I changed that. Now you're only contributing proportionally. You said you wanted freedom, well now you've got it. She dropped into the chair across from me like the weight of it all had finally hit her. Her hands were still holding the expense sheet, but now she wasn't looking at it. Just sitting there trying to make sense of what was unfolding. This isn't what I meant, she said softly. Then what did you mean? I asked. Because last night you gave me a detailed breakdown of everything wrong with our marriage, everything you resented, everything you felt you were denied. I motioned toward the folder. This morning I addressed those exact issues. There was a long pause. She didn't say anything, just stared down at the table. So, what happens now? She finally asked. Now, I said. Now you get to experience all 7 pieces of advice. The whole package. I ticked them off slowly, deliberately. You get to maintain your independence. You get to manage your finances solo. You can go live somewhere else if you want. Travel. Date. Reevaluate what you really want. You said you didn't get a chance to explore your options. Well, now's your chance. She looked up, her voice trembling. And what about us? I met her eyes. According to you, there is no us. You said you were stuck in a pathetic marriage. That you settled. That I wasn't what you needed. Well, now you're not stuck anymore. Something shifted behind her eyes, a flicker of panic, maybe even regret. Her shoulders tensed. You're talking like we're getting divorced. I'm talking like it's finally time to be honest, I said quietly. About what this relationship really is, not the version we've been pretending it was for years. I looked her dead in the eye. What happened last night wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a compromise. It was a verdict. You stood there and told me our marriage was a mistake. Loud and clear. Well, message received. I took a deep breath. And now I'm doing the only thing I can that feels genuinely helpful. I'm giving you the freedom you claim to be missing. The independence you said you needed so badly. She didn't respond right away, just stared, her eyes searching my face, maybe for some sign that I was bluffing. When none came, she finally spoke. What if I don't want this kind of independence? She asked, her voice fragile. I gave her a soft, knowing smile. Then maybe, I said, you should have thought about that before you spent the entire night laying out every reason why this arrangement, this marriage, was a mistake. The house changed after that. 3 weeks into her freedom, we weren't a couple anymore. We were polite strangers, quietly orbiting around one another under the same roof. The awkwardness hung in the air like smoke. We said good morning, passed each other in the hallway, shared the occasional glance, but the connection? It was gone. In week 1, she tried to carry on like nothing had changed. Fancy dinners with friends. Shopping sprees. A spa appointment or 2. It was business as usual, until she started getting the receipts. Without my cards to fall back on, the costs started stacking up fast. By the end of week 2, I noticed her refreshing her banking app constantly, quietly muttering under her breath as she skimmed through transactions. Her nights out became nights in. Her group chats silent. She started dodging her friends, the very ones who had once been so vocal about everything I lacked. Then came week 3. The phone calls. I'd be in my office trying to focus and I'd hear her pacing the living room, her voice hushed but tense. She was calling them, her so-called advisory board. The same people who were so quick to say our marriage was beneath her, who had endless opinions on what I wasn't, were now nowhere to be found. Can I just stay at your place for a few nights? I heard her ask one evening, her voice hopeful. A long pause followed. Oh, your mother-in-law's coming to stay? For 3 weeks? Right. Yeah, no worries. The next call was quieter, but I still caught the gist. I know you said I should have kept my own apartment, but would it be okay if I crashed on your couch for a bit? Another pause. Your landlord doesn't allow overnight guests more than 3 days? Well, that's oddly specific. The one that stood out the most ironic of all, was the call she made to the friend who had preached the loudest about always having a backup plan. I heard it clear as day. Remember when you told me I should always have an exit strategy? Emily said, her voice low and hopeful. Well, I think I'm ready to activate it. And I was hoping. Then silence. A long, awkward pause. Oh, you're seeing someone exclusively now. and it wouldn't be a good time. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. Later that night, I was in the kitchen making dinner, simple pasta and sauce, nothing fancy, when she wandered in and stood near the stove. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me. "Smells good," she finally said almost timidly. "Thanks," I replied, not looking up. "There's sandwich stuff in the fridge if you're hungry." "I'm not hungry," she said. But she didn't leave. After a moment, she spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said. About giving me the freedom to either fix things or walk away." I stirred the sauce, letting her speak. "Maybe we rushed into this separation thing," she added. I kept stirring, keeping my voice even. "What problems, Emily? Because you didn't say we were facing issues. You said you married the wrong man. That's not a problem you fix with effort, that's a fundamental choice." She looked frustrated. "You know, it's not that simple." I didn't mean it the way it sounded. "But that's the thing," I said, turning to face her. "It wasn't a slip-up. It wasn't just something said in anger. It was deliberate. Planned. A detailed presentation about all the ways I failed you. That's not something you stumble into." She looked down at the floor. Security deposits are more than I make in 2 months. It's harder than I thought." "That does sound tough," I said gently, turning back to the stove. "But that's the independence you said you needed. This is part of it." "I don't want to live like this," she said suddenly, her voice cracking a little. "I don't want a roommate. I want to come home to someone who actually cares about me. Someone who asks how my day went. Who eats dinner with me. Sleeps beside me. Makes me feel like I'm home." I plated my pasta, took a seat at the table, and looked at her. "Those are completely reasonable things to want," I said calmly. "The real question is, do you want them with me? Or do you still believe you'd be happier with someone who checks off your friends list?" She sat down slowly, as if the weight of that question finally settled in her chest. "I don't want to throw away our marriage because of one bad conversation." I shook my head slightly. "I'm not throwing anything away. I've just stopped pretending that conversation was isolated. It wasn't one bad moment. It was the end result of months, maybe years, of resentment. Of you looking at me and seeing someone who didn't measure up. That wasn't a mistake born out of emotion. It was calculated." She stared at me, tears welling in her eyes. "People can change," she whispered. "We can work on this. Together." I kept my tone steady. "What are we working on exactly?" "The things you laid out, those weren't minor issues. They were fundamental differences. You don't think I'm enough. And I'm tired of trying to prove that I am." A long silence followed. And then softly, "What if I was wrong?" Her voice cracked. "What if I made a mistake I can't take back? Please, please don't give up on us." I stood up from the table and quietly gathered my plate. "I'm not giving up on us," I said calmly, setting my plate in the sink. "There is no us anymore." I turned to face her, my voice steady but final. "There's just you, finally free to follow all 7 pieces of advice your friends gave you. And me, finally free to find someone who doesn't need a committee to decide whether I'm worth loving." The divorce papers were waiting on the kitchen table when she came downstairs that Saturday morning. I'd had them drawn up during the week, clean, simple, no unnecessary complications. Just a few signatures and we'd both be free. She paused in the doorway, her eyes flicking from the envelope to me, sitting at the table with my coffee and newspaper. There weren't 7 steps this time. Just one. Much simpler. Much easier to remember. I folded the paper and looked her in the eye. "Here it is," I said. "When you tell someone they're not good enough for you, believe them when they agree with you." Her face went pale. "That's not what I meant," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied, "it is. You spent an entire evening spelling it out, why I wasn't the husband you needed. Why this marriage was a mistake. Why you settled for a life that didn't excite you. You didn't hold back. And I heard you." I took a slow sip of coffee. "And you know what? I agreed." She opened her mouth to respond, but I kept going. "You want to talk about what's fair? Fair would have been having that conversation with me, not with your friends. Fair would have been trying to fix things together, not building a case against me behind my back." "They weren't trying to break us apart," she whispered. "They just didn't want to see me unhappy." "Oh really?" I said. "Because when you were actually struggling these past few weeks, when your so-called support system was supposed to show up, where were they?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew the answer. "The papers are simple," I continued. "No alimony. No property disputes. No courtroom drama. You get what you said you wanted, complete independence. I get something I've been missing for a long time, my self-respect. She looked down at the folder, then back up at me. Her voice trembled. So, this is really it? 5 years of marriage, over because of one bad night. I shook my head gently. No, I said. 5 years of marriage ended because you decided it wasn't worth saving. I'm just the one putting it in writing. And there's nothing you can say to change my mind. I stood up, pushed in my chair. You already said everything that mattered. The only thing left is my response. She sat at the table in silence, staring at the paperwork. And that afternoon, without another word, she signed. By evening she was gone.